We're here with Dr. Cohen today, and we're going to talk about something that is probably something that many of us find difficult, because our topic today is the nature of change.
Change. People come to me often, and they say, gee, I want to feel better, I want to do something better, I read about this and I want to learn to do that. And I, or myself going to anyone else, fix my car, whatever it is, they say, listen, this is what you need to do. And then you start doing it for a while, and you kind of fire it up. But over a little bit of time, it starts to stop happening. And all kinds of then psychological sorts of things come in. I can't do it. I'm not going to go back there. I didn't do what he said. This didn't feel good. Whatever. But later on, our voice inside starts to speak and say, gee, you know, I really need to do that. I need to make that happen. So part of what I and anyone who goes to anyone to help learn something new have to do is to try and help you as an individual, generic you, to learn how to work with yourself in such a way that as you begin to change, that you can deal with it. Now, what does this mean, really? Well, I think one of the reasons change is so difficult is because the reason we are the way we are before somebody says, why don't you do it differently, is because that's sort of where we have fallen into. It's sort of like how we know ourselves.
Is it a groove? Some would call it a rut, but is
I would say it's our
oft-repeated?
I would say it's more than that. I would say it's our identity. I know myself by X. How I wear, what I dress, what I eat, where I go, who I hang out with. And identity is a big word. It's not just the reflection in the mirror that I need to see, but it's also cellular. In other words, there's sort of in a field, a sense of body awareness and things that I know to be my sense of me. And when it comes time to start changing some of that, then I have to give up what I've identified as me. And that's not always so easy. So that's one of the first things I think it's important, is to recognize that when we start eating differently and dressing differently or being out with different people, though our soul wants that, there's still that us, the ego, me, my identity, that may not be quite prepared to give up its sense of self.
And will it sabotage?
Well, we do. We do sabotage ourselves. It's a given, what we do. Now, the other thing that I think is another aspect of this is the fact that we do certain things because we're balancing ourselves. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that if I have if I'm the kind of person who has a lot of emotions in my gut, and it's gnawing at me in here, I balance that by eating. I give it something to chew on. So if I were to say I want you to fast for 5 days, all of a sudden you haven't got that thing to chew on, and now this part that you didn't know was there anymore because you've been just kind of unconsciously keeping it satisfied, now starts to speak louder and louder and louder. And now you have to deal with yourself, the part that you didn't know what to do with before. And the best you could do was eat.
And I think that also the part that you haven't even recognized as what it is yet,
exactly.
On some level.
At some level. So all of a sudden now you're having these uncomfortable feelings that you didn't know what to do with before. And so oftentimes, it's another thing, so we unconsciously start to do what we did because we just can't handle the discomfort. Now it could be physical discomfort, it could be mental discomfort, whatever it is, depending on the nature of the process. Or we would like to hang out with, let's just say, people who go to the opera. But I'm a country hayseed, you know, and my friends don't do that. But I really want to go.
Or change a political opinion.
Or change a political, whatever. And so if I go to the opera, well, I may not want to go because I'm worried I won't look like the people who go to opera. Whatever.
Highbrow.
Highbrow. It's an illusion, but the point here is that I'm not part of that group, and therefore I can't go and be part of that because I'm not part of them. And I have to buy all these accoutrements and have a whole thing to go enjoy what they enjoy. Now, to some extent, there is an economic issue. You know, there's some things we won't be able to do. I can't buy my $10 million boat and hang out on the Riviera. But that's a separate issue. We're talking about people who go to opera, or people who do yoga, or people who eat vegetarian. All right? I'm not them. And so therefore, who am I kidding? Why should I go out and hang out with them? I'll stick out like a sore thumb. So we have all this dystonic cognitive stuff that goes on. And the other part of that, or another part of that is, I don't want to lose my friends over this. I'm very tied to my friends and
to the
and my
country
peer
western
group.
friends.
My country western friends, or it could be the other way around. Maybe I want to go country western dancing, but I'm a college professor in English at Harvard, right? We don't do those kinds of things here, I mean, it goes both ways. It's just not.
Absolutely.
There's no
Hierarchy.
There's no hierarchy here. It's just different from.
Okay.
And so, I mean, Titanic had this big scene, where they're upstairs, the movie Titanic, where they're upstairs and all these wealthy people, and he takes her down into.
And she has a
the other
ball
room.
down there.
Well, because she's lit up. So, and they can't go down there. There's a whole thing. You don't do that
Right.
sort of thing. So there's a whole bunch of issues. So there are aspects of ourselves that we're not prepared to own and feel good about owning them independent of our relationship to those around us or those we've identified as those around us. Ethnic diets. Everybody says, I want to eat differently. Well, my mother cooked this way. Her mother cooked. We've always eaten this way. All of a sudden, you're going to eat differently? It's an affront to your family, for crying out loud. When I became vegetarian, it was years later. My mother would still serve me stuff.
She still was giving you meat, huh?
Mom, I don't eat this. Oh, you're vegetarian,
That's so classic, though. So many moms do that.
Well, of course. There's a whole bunch of issues there. I mean, it's a wonderful discussion about moms and food for a whole other session. But the point is there are a number of restraining things that may prevent us from making those changes. But then there's the next step. Let's just say you actually kind of get into it for a while. I mean, you go move to the community, you want a spiritual community. Maybe you're not going to watch TV for a while. And you're really doing pretty well. You're really feeling good. And then stresses start occurring. Maybe at home, or maybe in your job, or whatever. And all of a sudden, this stuff you're doing doesn't make sense anymore. It's like, who's this? What's this mean? It's a bunch of garbage. There's a little thing that goes on. And so it's sort of like there's an issue, you see, and we've stretched ourselves way out away from what we were, but there's this rubber band here, And all of a sudden, bam! And so we're back to where we were. Now, this is very evidently seen, for example, in people who make very dramatic and abrupt changes in their life without easing into things. You see them, they suddenly go join this group. And then years later, they just blow up in the whole thing and whatever. They leave it, or they have a breakdown, or they can't ever integrate it. It's because they really didn't. It became an external thing, not an internal thing. So part of them wanted to make the change, but it was out here. But they really were dealing with their core. Their core hadn't caught up yet. So changes, ideally, have to happen in a manner that's in accordance with what our strength is to adjust and allow those changes to percolate. Let's talk about a physiological issue. If I am not eating for a day, there are certain physiological changes that occur in the fasting mode, but deep changes don't occur. On the other hand, if I'm without food for weeks, whole deeper changes occur at deeper and deeper levels the longer I do something.
So you are what you do, and if you continue to do something new for a very, very long time,
and you allow for the adjustments.
Okay.
In other words,
allow that there's going to be stresses
and work through them and process them and integrate them.
And go through the pain of those adjustments.
Sometimes it's pain, sometimes it's adjustment. I mean, adjustment can be pain depending on its level of intensity.
Exactly.
Not all adjustments are painful. Then you're there. All of a sudden, you've walked 5,000 miles and you're in a new place. But you've walked it, you've traversed it. Along the way, you had some emotional experiences, you got it done with you, and then you're someplace, and then you go back and you go, oh, I'm really different than I was before. But that has to happen within. And there are so many examples of this. People leaving and coming back, and what happens, you're an adult, and you walk into your mother's home, like the Iron Maiden of adolescence forms around you, and you're back in this little thing, like, I'm a little kid again. I'm good. Outside of this environment, I'm a full-blown adult. I run a company. I go home to mom. I'm a teenager again, dealing with the same issues that I had before. It's an amazing experience.
into this on the next level, but in as much as one person may want this change, what sometimes, have you ever counseled two people, let's say a married couple who want to make a change?
Yes.
Because a relationship is an organic thing too, and in essence, a relationship becomes one person or one entity at times, that relationship, and change in that. I think a lot of husbands and wives probably would have the same complaint, and that's that we argue about the same things over and over and over again. Or maybe they don't argue. They just have conflict about the same issues
Groundhog Day.
over and
You need to remember the show Groundhog Day. That's what it is. So, folks,
I'll show it
I'm
again.
telling you.
Mission Awareness Office.
We're back and we're going to continue our conversation talking about the nature of change, and now we want to flip a little bit to, so we know that if we don't live a certain, let's say, I'll call it lifestyle.
I'm going to quit reading books on Betty Crocker. I'm going to start reading books on organic cooking. So we make a change. We start to work with that. So that's number one. So start surrounding yourself with support paraphernalia, as it were. People, books, and then do, the practices.
Okay.
And so
meaning that you're involved in whatever it is
that you want to work with, you have to live it
concept.
in some way. Now, if you're meditating, you practice meditation. If you want to
Right.
learn to eat organic or vegetarian, you hang out with the vegetarian, you read vegetarian books, go to vegetarian meetings, talk to people who have gone through it. It's a process, as I've already said.
I like that doing the do. That's
Doing the
good.
do. You got to do the do. But you need to have help in doing the do.
Okay.
And that's where the group is.
Okay.
Hang out with people who are also doing that.
Okay.
So you're going to kind of let go of this ring and go to this ring.
Okay.
And you make acquaintances. You feel like, remember I talked about earlier in the show about, am I really who they are?
Yeah.
What you're to find out is, I am. They're just like me. And they go through the same things I do. And you begin to talk to them about that.
Tell me something. Earlier in the first part, you made an analogy utilizing people who wanted to change from country music to opera, or vice versa, opera to country music. I think one of the things that people have difficulty with is that you don't always have to give up all of the old to change one part of yourself, do you? Why do people find such difficulty with that? You know, you can still hang out with X, Y, and Z, even though you want to hang out with A, B, and C now. Do you know what I'm saying? I think that's part of what, you know, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, you know.
Well, I agree with you. And different personalities do it differently.
Yeah.
Remember, the folks who have the hardest time are the folks like you and I, who are just these all-or-nothing, go-get-'em, learn-it-all, do-it-now kind of folks. So we suffer. The folks who sort of amble along, make choices, kind of are comfortable with that, and supportive environments that allow for change, and people don't have to have them be something for them, so they can allow you to be whoever you want to become, and they don't lose themselves in it. That, you know, we have to look at that. So I think that the important thing to remember is that core doesn't change. Think of it as a sculpture. A sculpture's in the rock, you're just kind of liberating it. But you have to be mindful of the fact that it's best to go slowly.
Or you could.
And to remember, just because I'm hanging out with these rock and rollers, or I'm now hanging out with the Zen folks, it doesn't mean I have to give up all of me. This is called splitting off parts of our personality in psychiatric terms. And we get into trouble when we do that, because we give up part of ourselves that we really need. But I give this up so that I can do this.
Right.
Well, there's a problem. At some point in your life, hopefully, if it's a useful and productive aspect of yourself, then you need to you would hopefully integrate that in a more positive way. If the part of yourself is robbing banks, shooting drugs, doing things you don't want to do, well, hopefully that part of you has to do with some other part, and you take care of that. You don't need to go back to that anymore, because that wasn't a very good part of you anyway.
These concepts have very much to do with human growth and the potential that we all have to grow as individuals, and the fact that many of us stay in some kind of a stasis where we don't change. Through various things that we talked about and things that we haven't talked about, the fears of change, that kind of thing. I guess,
I might become someone else. It might actually happen, and then what? Where will I be? Who will I be?
Okay. Other techniques. Now, it's so funny when you actually, articulate it. It makes so much sense. The way you said, well, if you're going to be involved in this activity, hang out with people who are involved in that activity. Read books on it. It makes so much sense. It's almost common sense, but yet we don't think of these kinds of things.
Well, it takes focus, and sometimes when we start making change, we see all the things we want to change, and we get a little lost in that. I think it's best to do things simply and make what appear to be major changes one at a time. In other words, gee, I want to be vegetarian. Oh, I want to meditate. Oh, I want to do yoga every day. Oh, you get into this thing. They're, for you, all connected. I gave a talk in New York one time about biofeedback. And we were talking about it, and a woman came up to me afterwards, and I then somehow got on a discussion about eating breakfast as being good. I mean, I don't know, conversations can go anywhere. And she came up to me, she said, Dr. Cohen, if you want to eat breakfast, I have to quit my job.
Whoa.
Well, because I had to
How
get up.
did she justify that?
Well, I had to get up earlier, and then I had to make time to eat. This is in New York, you have to understand Manhattan. I had to get the train. There's a whole long connected story about, for her, eating was in her mind, was so intimately connected with her life and time that she had to make major changes opposed to this. Now, I didn't have a long time to talk to her. Perhaps she wanted to quit her job. This was just an excuse, but that was a little too fearful. Or she just didn't see how to make it happen. And for her, it just was a mountain that was too high to climb just to keep her job at the same time. I got to cook food, got to buy this stuff, all that sort of stuff that goes on. So there are many things for us that unconsciously are connected. And part of having a reflecting board is to have someone who is knowledgeable in this notion to help us sort these things out. So that the first thing is to say, I want to maintain my change, but I'm currently having trouble. Let me now seek help, because now I know I'm coming up that inner part of me that's caught up in the old stuff, or something that I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just know that I want to go forward, and something's going, So my conscious will wants to do this, but some inner part of me doesn't want to do that. Well, then we can go to somebody. Hopefully, it's somebody who's worked through it themselves. I mean, isn't that all the people who write these books? People who've worked through it. People say, how I did this, how I became that, or they won a gold medal. We know they've worked through what it takes to win a gold medal. So there are now our experts. And so they become coaches, or whatever. They're people to help us because they've worked through it. They had that experience to give to us, to say, I remember that when I was there at that stage. And let me tell you something. Oh, God, they've been through that. Oh, this is what you have to do. And everybody's got their techniques to do that. And so we look to people with experience in whatever area we have to help us through these things. Now, just because you're working with vegetarianism and can't make the change doesn't mean you can't go to a psychotherapist who knows nothing about vegetarianism. They have the skills to help you learn about yourself and find out what's blocking you. You make the choices what you do with that freedom, but they can help you. So, there's different ways to go about that.
I want to flip this just a little bit, and we've been talking about people who, in every example almost that we've used over the these two segments, we've talked about individuals who wanted to make a change for the better. What about individuals who have something negative that they want to remove or to cleanse themselves of?
Well,
there is some of the same process in there.
Let me answer that question for you. There's many ways to think about it, and I'll tell you what I think is a more productive way.
Mm-hmm.
If you spend all your time trying to remove that which is bad,
Mm-hmm.
you spend less time doing what is good.
Mm-hmm.
So my suggestion to people is spend more time doing the good that you know to do. The bad will have to drop off because there's enough room for both of them in there.
Well, I mean things like I want to stop smoking. I want to stop biting my nails. I want to stop.
Well,
I'm thinking of physical things, but there's mental things as well.
I say tie people to a tree and throw tortillas around them all day until they get over it.
Okay. So what you're saying is that even for people who, let's use stop smoking, people who want to stop smoking,
There are techniques.
perhaps that, well, I guess this is a really poor example, but I guess that if I concentrate more on some of the good things and widen that base of good things that I'm involved in, perhaps I at least won't be smoking as much.
Right. Or maybe it's relaxation. Or
yeah, there are issues there.
There are issues there that I may be able to focus on. How do I want to do this other thing?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I can focus on how good it feels not to.
Mm-hmm.
And it maybe you need to do a patch, or maybe I need to go do auriculotherapy, or maybe I need to do something, chew Nicorette gum.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you need to go and talk to somebody, do hypnosis, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the point is that you know you want to change,
Mm-hmm.
and you're getting support to make that change. You're taking active participation in tools that facilitate that change.
Okay. Dr. Cohen, you work with a lot of people in this community, and you refer people to other practitioners who work in other areas of holistic thinking and science and medicine. How many people are successful in creating that metamorphosis that is a person who truly is changed at the end, who has, is it achievable by most individuals, do you believe?
I believe the issue is not where you get to, but the continual process of moving forward. And so in my opinion, everybody who comes to me is successful.
Okay. Okay.
If we try and have some goal like, that's where I want to be, that's the self-defeating message that we have to get away from. We're all making change. Who's to decide whether you work 5 millimeters or walk 5 miles relative to the cosmos? Each one is a minuscule part of it all. The point is that you've made the changes that you can make.
Right.
And you've worked in the way that you could work at this time and at this point.
And continuing on
and
the path.
And you're continuing on the path. And who says what it is? Because we don't know. What's observable on the outside may not be actually maybe much larger on the inside. And we don't know that timing, sometimes you can't do things. It's just the nature of the way God intended it.
Okay.
But we're working with it. So I prefer to think that everybody who comes, the fact that you come to someone like me means you're making change. The fact that you do a little bit means you make change. And the fact you heard about it today, but didn't do it until 2 years from now, you've been making changes to get you to the point where you can make it 2 years from now. It's been an ongoing process. So I think everybody is really successful.
Okay.
Most people make the changes.
So
It's a matter of degree.
So the answer really is yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll see you next week.
Good.
Okay.